In the harsh economic environment that we're living in today, middle-class families are getting increasingly more cash-strapped and debt-burdened. In fact, if we compare the patterns of consumption from middle-class households of the 2000s and right now, we can rapidly realize that many of the hallmarks that symbolize that someone has made it to the American dream, such as the ability to take vacations or having more than one vehicle per household or dedicating a share of their incomes to leisure or entertainment, are actually things today's middle class can no longer afford. It's sad, but it's true. The American middle class is getting poorer over the years, and in today's video, we've compiled several services, products, assets, goods, or lifestyle choices the current generation of middle-income earners can't really spend their money on. But before moving on, we kindly ask you to support our channel with a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Without further ado, here are 15 things that today's middle class can no longer afford. 1. Having a standard middle class lifestyle. Until 1990, the standard middle-class lifestyle included home ownership, sending children to college, affording health care costs, owning 2 or more vehicles, traveling at least once a year, and middle-class Americans were also known worldwide for their purchasing power and for boosting the U.S. economy through their spending. Right now, the reality of middle-income earners is definitely not the same. In fact, a whopping 81% of households in the income bracket are facing a consumer recession this year, Primerica revealed. Notably, nearly 3/4 or 72% of middle-class workers believe that their income isn't keeping up with the rising cost of living. 2. Having 2 vehicles. Until the mid-2000s, it was very common to see middle-class families with 2 or more vehicles in their garages. In contrast, in 2023, households with 2 or more cars are likely to be a minority. Considering that prices for used and new vehicles are going through the roof and fuel costs are still at a historical high, the cost of maintaining a second car may be too much for many families to bear. In December, the average price for a used car was a staggering $30,899, according to Copilot. That amount is $7,146, or 30% more than if projected depreciation forecasts had held true. The average interest rate on a used car loan was 10.25% last month, compared to 6.68% to finance a new vehicle, according to Edmunds. That compares to 7.4% and 4.1% respectively a year earlier. Furthermore, nearly half, or 47% of American drivers, saw their car insurance costs creep up in 2022, according to a recent survey from the insurance comparison website Insurify. For some drivers, it was less of a creep and more of a giant leap. In 3 states, Oregon, Maryland, and Virginia, drivers were slammed with a 25% hike on their insurance bills. 3. Having a stay-at-home parent. In the 70s, when the U.S. labor force was mainly constituted by men, 49% of American women with kids under 18 were stay-at-home moms, according to data from the Pew Research Center. Nowadays, however, 83% of middle-class families with children can't afford to have only one income earner. And despite more moms joining the workforce, real household purchasing power has barely budged since then. 4. Having family health insurance. The American healthcare system is rigged, and we are the ones footing the bill. Healthcare costs have ballooned over the past 2 decades, middle-class health insurance costs rising over 5 times faster than wages, as reported by the Kaiser Family Foundation. While the average cost of family coverage, premiums, and deductibles has been going up steadily by about 6.7% per year, middle-class wages only go up by about 1.9% per year. The group found that individual coverage plans rose 58% from an average of $5,049 annually in 2010 to $7,911 in 2022. Over the same period, family coverage plans rose more than 63% from $13,770 to $22,463. 5. Putting their kids in preschool. Preschool provides many benefits for kids' learning process. Even though most countries with developed economies offer public preschool as a standard benefit to all of their 4-year-olds, America does not. Middle-income parents really struggle to pay for increasingly costly private preschool. Only very wealthy people can afford current decent care and education for young children, said Richard Brandon, a political scientist recently from the University of Washington. Very few can afford what we estimate is the cost of quality care. The analyst pegs the cost of sending a child to a preschool that has ample, safe facilities, a developmentally appropriate curriculum, and well-paid teachers at about $13,655 per child per year for full-time, full-year preschool. That's about $1,000 more than the national average per pupil spending in K-12, as calculated by the National Center for Education Statistics. On top of that, that's also nearly 16% of an $88,000 annual income, more than double the 7% figure the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services deems affordable. Yet, with few exceptions, families earning $88,000 a year, right in the middle of the middle class, get no government help to cover the cost of educating their 4-year-olds. 6. Going to Disneyland. Until the early 2000s, going to Disneyland at least once a year was a common thing amongst middle-class families. Back then, a 4-day, 1-park-per-day all-inclusive ticket would cost around $70 for people aged 10 or older, or $280 for a family of 4. Today, that same ticket costs $395 per person, up from $360 last year. That means a family of 4 would have to disburse $1,580 to visit the happiest place on earth. And that's just the price to get in the door. 7. Going to live concerts. According to Forbes, in 1990, the average ticket price to see an artist live in concert was a mere $11. That's about $52.60 when adjusting to today's inflation. But last year, prices to see live music performances were almost 4 times higher than that amount. A report by Finance Buzz showed that in the past year alone, average ticket prices for the top 100 tours in the U.S. jumped by 18%. On average, concert goers paid $200.14 per ticket to see their favorite singers and bands performing in 2022. 8. Going to sports events. The current macroeconomic environment has presented new inflationary challenges for the entertainment industry, particularly live sports events. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that in the past 10 years, prices for admission to sporting events increased by 19.42%. What's even more shocking is the fact that in the past 25 years, from 1997 to 2022, ticket prices skyrocketed by 117.54% in total. When these increases are compared to the overall inflation rate during the same period, inflation for sporting events was much higher. That means that a ticket costing $100 in 1997 would cost $217.54 in 2022 for an equivalent purchase. Needless to say, with costs soaring so high, many middle-class sports fanatics are having to turn their TVs on if they want to see their favorite teams playing. 9. Having cable TV. Well, the cost of catching up on your favorite TV shows isn't any cheaper. In the 80s, middle-class Americans had no more than 10 different TV channels. They were all free, and no one really complained about a lack of stations. Today, however, things are strikingly different. Data from a variety of public sources shows that the average monthly cable package is now $217.42 per month. That's more than the average household's monthly cost of $205.50 for major utilities combined. Cable bills notoriously keep creeping up every 6 months to a year, says money-saving expert and U.S. News contributor Andrea Wirch. If your bill is drastically more than when you first signed up, you may need to reconsider if it's worth it. This means that Americans are paying on average $2,609 a year for cable TV. That's a luxury few can afford. 10. Going on a shopping spree. For decades, the U.S. middle class was known all over the globe for its high rates of consumption, going on shopping sprees at U.S. malls, and having significant purchasing power. But unfortunately, that is no longer the case for most U.S. households in that income group. Financial advisors with Primerica estimate that middle-class families now spend up to 35% of their earnings on gas and groceries and utilities, 30% on housing, 17% on healthcare, and about 8 to 10% on other expenses. That means there isn't a lot of money left at the end of the month for discretionary purchases, if at all. The surge in inflation notoriously affects people in the middle-income group because their consumption will go down. Most of the income is allocated for essential items, so when inflation is high, they're forced to reduce the number of products they consume, they wrote in a recent report. Moreover, the firm also highlighted that around 3/4 of middle-income households reported curbing non-essential purchases last quarter due to the cost of living, and just over half had to dip into their emergency funds to cover basic expenses. 11. Paying for things in cash. Given that the cost of everyday necessities is squeezing the monthly budgets of middle-class households all over the nation, almost half, or 49% of middle-income earners, are relying on credit cards to make ends meet. In the past quarter alone, about 29% of workers in that income bracket have said that their credit card debt has increased. With interest rates at the highest levels in decades, those balances can bulk up pretty fast. However, a new LendingTree survey found that 43% of middle-income Americans expect to add to their debt in the next 6 months. The share was highest for parents with children under 18, with 58% expecting to take on debt in the first half of 2023. The most common reason for adding debt? Paying for necessities, followed by emergencies and healthcare costs, LendingTree said. 12. Purchasing homes in middle-class neighborhoods. A report by the National Association of Realtors exposed that there are only 250,000 affordable homes in middle-class neighborhoods that are on the market right now. That's a sharp decline from the roughly 656,000 affordable homes available in middle-class neighborhoods in 2019. Experts say many factors are responsible for astronomical prices of housing, including the recent rate hikes by the Fed. According to the S&P Case-Shiller Index, home prices are up nearly 19% compared to the same time last year. But that's not all. In at least 500 cities in the U.S., the average home price in middle-class neighborhoods is nearly $1 million, pricing out most middle-class Americans. The absurdity doesn't end there. Zillow's senior economist Jeff Chucker says that at least 1/3 of middle-class neighborhoods have become upper-class neighborhoods since the pandemic began, and home prices have shot up by almost 47%. 13. Living in major cities. In 2022, the capital required to sign a lease on the average price $3,600 a month apartment in San Francisco often topped $12,000, owing to requirements for first and last month's rent, plus security deposits and a broker fee. The savings that used to be associated with the middle class have dried up in the past few years, as inflation ran wild and wage growth stagnated. Not only does it make it harder for people living in major cities to stay in the middle class, but it makes coming up with high sums to rent or buy city apartments virtually impossible. it's very hard to get people to understand that the affordable housing crisis is not for the very poor, says lawyer Michelle Dickerson of the University of Texas, an expert in housing and the middle class. It's for people with good jobs who are not poor enough to qualify for subsidized housing, nor rich enough to pay the rising housing prices. A family that makes $100,000 can't afford to buy a house in most U.S. cities, Dickerson says. 14. Saving money for the future. A separate Primerica survey found that 74% of those with incomes between $60,000 and $100,000 are unable to save for their future, up from 66% a year ago. Unfortunately, I think this is only going to get worse. Ted Jenkins, CEO at Atlanta-based Oxygen Financial, said of Americans' financial standing. Hope for the American dream is at an all-time low at all income brackets, but that's especially true among the middle class, according to the latest Gallup poll, with a similar rate, 64% saying they believe they will be worse off financially this year than they were in 2022. 15. Visiting another country. Taking a regular family vacation is an important mark of middle-class identity in America. According to a 2015 survey by the Pew Research Center, respondents ranked having the wherewithal to go on a vacation third, behind having a secure job and being able to save money as a requirement for being middle class in America. Since at least the 1930s, taking regular vacations has been a hallmark of making it into the American middle class, as explained by historian Patty Limerick, director of the Center for the American West at the University of Colorado Boulder. She calls this trend, which held strong from the New Deal in the 1930s and into the 1970s and 80s, the democratization of recreation. In the past, traveling abroad was something middle-class families could afford to do once every 5 years or so. But today, with airline tickets 25% higher than a year ago and 41% higher compared to pre-pandemic levels, the dream of visiting another country is, well, just a dream for the United States middle class. Many of the things that make life livable are becoming out of reach of our population, and we're having to let go of the things we enjoy as the cost of basic necessities eats a larger share of our pay every month. Being a part of the middle class is more than having access to education and home ownership. In fact, those are essential aspects that should be guaranteed for all income groups. The American middle class is the epitome of the lifestyle that the whole world has embraced. And yet, Americans are being excluded from the culture they created themselves. Our standard of living is declining at a breathtaking speed, and that's a process that gets even worse with each passing year. With a recession at our door, conditions are expected to get even tougher in the foreseeable future. But if anything, history has shown us time and time again that we're resilient, and we have what it takes to turn things around and live fully. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to keep tuned with our next videos.